Welcome to the Boston Art Podcast,
Boston's premier art podcast,
where we talk art, culture, and philosophy.
My name is Theodore Earthworms.
And I am Brian Huntress.
Welcome to the show.
So, I don't know if this is going to make a whole episode, but I did an assignment recently for school that I've been thinking about a lot lately on Casta paintings from Latin America's colonial period.
What's that?
So this is pretty heavy subject matter, just to be completely straight up. These paintings are family portraits that aren't focused on individual people or families or their stories or emotions or anything, but they're actually a method of codifying racial hierarchies in the colonial period in Latin America. So I'll just be completely straight up there.
People used to make them to enforce racial hierarchies?
Yes. So obviously it goes without saying they're very racist and very, very colonialist.
Cool.
They existed only in the 1800s, 1700s? 18th century New Spain, which is
It's a
what
pretty
aligns.
racist time in South America.
Oh, yeah. It aligns roughly with what's known as Mexico and Central America. So the people depicted in these paintings were Spanish people from Spain, indigenous people from that area, and people from Africa who wound up there because of the transatlantic slave trade. So it's kind of interesting because those are different racial hierarchies that existed, and there were also the descendants of combinations of those people, and then there were also gender hierarchies. So, I mean, what my research was on, I was analyzing those paintings and looking at how clothing are tells for the racial structures that were being enforced by these paintings. So to kind of give some context, these were family portraits of a 3-person family unit. So it's a mother, father, and their child. And it illustrates the ways that the forms this trio could take in the colonial region and time period. So these clothing styles were either a mixture to display someone's combined racial identity, or they were, for example, in a couple that might be a European father and an indigenous mother, if she's wearing all European clothing of the time period, it might indicate that she's kind of giving into colonialism. It might indicate their wealth and status. It's kind of distracting that you're on your phone right now. Are you?
I'm looking at pictures of these paintings, see?
Oh, okay.
I'm doing research while creating a visual aid while you do your presentation.
Okay, I just got distracted because it looked like you were like completely texting or something, so I got a little worried.
Sorry, I'm just checking my email while I fucking ignore your fucking bullshit presentation. Just kidding, I love you. I'm very excited to learn more about Casta paintings.
I also, to be totally straight up, don't know if that's how you pronounce it because this was an online class.
So
I think that it is, but I'm going to just check really quick.
So the thing is with these paintings is like during like I don't know about Mexico in the 1800s or like during the American Civil War, but I know that like Venezuela and other countries were going through a thing where their leaders and presidents or whatever of a lot of South American countries wanted to become more attractive to colonial and European settlers.
Yeah.
So they would try to make themselves and their countries more white, or like make more white to
be appealing to settlers.
To be appealing to settlers, such as the Confederados, who were exiles and political and war criminals fleeing this American Civil War, and took up shop in South American countries as a way to continue their slave practice.
Right.
So what does this relate to that?
It completely does. So these paintings are not necessarily a reflection of what was actually happening in society. Maybe it was to a degree, but these are from the perspective of the colonizers. So inherently, well, let me just I'll read to you what I wrote as my introduction. Blah, 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 blah. Tiny details. So this is focusing on the clothing. My title was Historic Threads, the Role of Clothing in Casta Paintings of Latin America's Colonial Period. So it talks about the paintings in general, but don't laugh at me.
No, you're waving around the mic.
Sorry.
I'm gonna make sure you have headphone monitors next time, so you know that you sound good, because that's the problem here is that I don't have headphones for you.
Should I wear them? Or is it better? It's better that you wear them. Okay.
Sorry. All right, please proceed.
Shut up.
I'm shutting up.
Okay. So my presentation is mostly on clothes and how they can help you decode these images, but if you're looking at them at large, what they are they're propaganda essentially for colonization. So when we're talking about the clothing, small details, most often the style and state of their clothing, sometimes they're shown as like ripped or really new, indicate the social class, racial and ethnic background, and wealth of the figures depicted, as well as the relationship between them and any influential power dynamics in their family structure. This type of painting is not common anymore. It doesn't exist anymore, except for some modern readaptations because of the Mexican independence is what I'm talking about specifically here, which I think happened in 1820. So by the 19th century, these paintings were completely out of fashion because we were seeing more of indigenous Mexicans and Latin Americans' perspectives on this concept. Yes, your hand is raised.
Maybe you're going to get to this at some point, but why would anybody make these? Because, like, if they indicate social class and stuff, why would somebody make one of these of themselves with ripped poor people clothes?
They weren't making them of themselves.
So what? So why are you gonna? Is this a question we can answer now, or are you gonna? Or is this? Am I spoiling it? Like, why would who made these and why? Why do these exist?
Spanish colonial artists from Spain.
So the Spanish people in South America, like, were these cartoons? Were they in newspapers? Like, what are they?
That's a good question. I don't know how they were disseminated. I'm looking at them as fine art. Most of these are oil paintings that are in museums now, but they were being produced in the same way that you might see paintings in, even talking about Spain, like of the Pope, or like kind of making the Catholic Church look good through their paintings by making people look blessed by God, by making them glow, by making them have really beautiful clothing. These paintings also were illustrating, essentially, they were illustrating social castes. And they had names for each of these castes, and the titles usually indicated mixtures of, like, if someone was a couple that was a Spanish Catholic person from Spain that was in New Spain, and their wife was an indigenous woman, their child would have a name too. I kind of like don't feel totally comfortable. I guess I maybe should say what it is, but they're wicked racist names. It's like fucking horrible, actually.
Maybe not.
I'm not going to say what it is. You guys can look it up.
So where's the list of names? Is it on Wikipedia?
Maybe.
Oh, Casta terminology.
Maybe we should have a Q&A segment. We can have a little.
Sorry for calling you baby on the podcast.
It's okay.
I gotta interject so we can. We're trying to chop it up and have a conversation.
But I'm trying to answer your questions. You keep asking more questions before I finish answering them.
Hey, I just want to jump in and say you're doing a wonderful job, and I didn't know about this before, and I like how the paintings look. And
It's
I
okay.
learn more about
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I just want to finish my introduction slide.
Okay, go for it. You're the boss. I'm listening.
So, these were essentially to reinforce the idea that Spanish colonizers had of these racial hierarchies. It wasn't a reflection of maybe the reality they found when they came to the area they called New Spain. It was what they wanted it to be, and it was what it ended up becoming under colonialism, which is interesting because this was happening, like we were talking, the revolution in Mexico happened in, I think, 1820. I'm going to quickly double check that because I think it's 1820 though. That's not that long ago. So the reason that I find these paintings interesting, the Mexican Revolution was 1910 to 1920. I'm gonna go back to my slides instead of just guessing dates because I apparently was wrong about that.
No, you're good. Fuck it.
But I'm saying it's really recent. So this stuff is interesting. I'm thinking from a contemporary lens because it gives context for racial stereotypes people might apply to people of these backgrounds today. It was the ideas that colonizing peoples that moved to this area had of the people that were there. So it gives us an idea of what the culture was like, the kind of social and racial violence that was existing at the time, and the way the descendants of mixed race parents would be treated. Because there were names for each of the individual castes, like racial castes, which were defined initially as essentially a Spaniard, an indigenous person. They called them Indio or Indians because the Spanish conquerors thought that they landed in the Indies, as we know, but that means indigenous Latin Americans.
Right.
And then people of African descent or black people. That term specifically is interesting because it's more of a colorist term than a geographical term because that's applied in some cases to other people with darker complexion that aren't actually African immigrants. And then the Spaniards were typically dressed, going back to clothing, they're well dressed, they're wearing trendy European fashion of the time, button waistcoats, tall hats, fine dresses with bustles, ruffled white collars and wrists, the kind of things you see typically in colonial painting of Europe. the Indio, or indigenous people of the region, were depicted in exaggerated or stereotypical indigenous patterns and styles. Some of the trademarks would be colorful embroidery, quarter sleeves, white tops and red skirts, ribbons tied around the head, and sometimes feathered headdresses or ponchos. So kind of a propagandized image of like Native Americans and Aztec. It's like a combination of those. Because again, we're seeing this through the lens of European settlers. The word term settlers feels weird in this context. I mean colonizers, because it wasn't an undiscovered land.
Well,
There's a lot to say about that term, probably.
I think the initiated would use that word interchangeably.
I never thought about that before, but that's like a sidebar that I'm going on in my head that term might
like
be.
I think even if somebody did not participate or design the colonial racist machinations, even if they were just poor people that got off a boat to find a better life, they're still they're a settler, which despite that, despite their individual innocence, they're still a colonial settler, even if they didn't like fucking, you know what I'm saying?
I don't know if it applies in this case though, because I don't know that we're talking about settlements. I think they found existing cities. But anyway, maybe that depends on the region. But anyway, so that's what the indigenous people will be wearing. The I don't want to use the term that's in this because it's wicked fucking racist, but it is what you think it is. Black individuals were depicted as extremely dark-skinned in a way that's actually inaccurate for the light source of palette of the work, which is actually common in colonial artworks in North America too. At times hiding their features, making them just silhouettes. They typically wore equally exaggerated and stereotypical African clothing, such as tight necklaces of hammered metal, patterned shawls, or robes wrapped around their shoulders. At times they were depicted in European clothing, which in this context indicates that they had been enslaved or were a formerly enslaved person. In all depictions of black figures in Casta paintings, it implied that their blackness reduces their social class. This caste system, which of course is now seen as extremely offensive and racist and hailing from colonial perspectives, helps us in this current context to understand the social climate of colonial New Spain. By creating combinations of these castes, which happened often at the time, they bore with it social and political implications for these couples and their mixed-race child. Yes.
Where is New Spain?
It is the region that now comprises
Mexico and
Central America.
Oh, okay. Oh, so New Spain, they were controlling that fucking entire bottleneck region. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They just showed up and fucking took it, basically.
Of course, right.
So to take a quick break, we're not looking at paintings. Like, these family portraits are maybe different from what we're used to seeing in European art, where they're not biblical figures, they're not specific people, they're not royalty, they're representations of a certain race or social class.
I'm looking at the paintings on my phone. I'm sorry.
I didn't stop. I was.
Oh, I thought I made you upset by looking at my phone.
Did you hear what I said?
I think so. That they're not they're not the same as, like, we might think that it's just like a sergeant family portrait, but it's actually like indicating it's almost like pictographic.
Yes.
Like it's telling us
they're kind of
something's-
symbols for. They're shorthand for a racial background. They're not like individual people with names.
Something I saw when I was just looking at these pictures was a line that said that these were like used by people in Spain to indicate what type of life they could have in New Spain. Like colonizer potential people who wanted to maybe go there and buy a bunch of land.
Oh yeah.
Would see these and be like, oh, okay, like I can see where I will fit into this. I'm going to be that guy up in the red cloak in the top left.
Yeah.
And I'll be able to employ and make money off of these people down at the bottom.
Or take them as my wife. Like, it tells you, it's kind of selling you a lifestyle. Like, these are early examples
these
of
are like travel brochures.
Yeah, like
for
colonial
racist people.
Racist travel brochures, essentially.
Wow. Okay.
But
now
it's not about
cooking.
the region.
Okay,
it's not showing
I
the
get
region. It's showing the lifestyle that you would have.
Right.
So, like, this isn't something that they would be showing on display in a museum for indigenous people to look at. Like, it just makes them look like shit and isn't realistic.
They wouldn't have been showing it then. Is that what you said?
Oh, I mean, now probably. But at the time, like, that wasn't the motive. Like, this was to, in the same way that we see art that propagandizes the Catholic Church in this time period, this is to propagandize, like, colonization. And it gives somebody who's never been there and doesn't understand context in a not necessarily verbal way. Like, you could just see in an image what your life would be like if you were there, or what they want it to be like.
This is especially sinister, too, because this is during the global era of chattel slavery and the transatlantic slave trade, which centralized humans as a asset or something that you could own.
And indigenous people.
Right. Well, yeah, I just mean humans. Like,
Yeah.
So, because, like, now, like, imagine if you were fucking some piece of shit, like, gentrifier, like, you wanted to, like, go buy a whole city block of, like, crappy, rundown, low-income housing and just bulldoze it and build up something else there.
Yeah.
You would get pictures of the property and the street and what's
Yeah.
there and the fucking surveys and shit. You wouldn't get a catalog of little pictures of all the people that are there.
Yeah.
Be like, oh, look at all these people that you can. Who knows what you could do with them?
Maybe you would if you were buying someone's apartment building or something. That's kind of bleak.
And I'm just saying, like, it's real. Like, these exist because of the ownership of humans. Like, you would never. Now it would be pointless. You wouldn't even want to know what kind of people were there. It'd be better if you didn't know, so you could just drive them out without ever meeting them.
Yeah.
Like, now they're not like, oh, we need to buy all these people. They're like, we need to buy this place and then get rid of these people.
And that's not the only reason for it, too. It is essentially the enforcement of a caste system. So it's also telling the people that are there what their role is supposed to be. It's providing answers for what happens, like, what is the social ranking of a Spanish father and a African mother? Where does their child land? These paintings, like, if you look at the titles of them, they're literally, like, this one translates to, from Spaniard and Indian, a mestizo is born, which is a really, really horrible term for a child born from one European and one multiracial parent.
Yeah. Unfortunately, these, like, are deep cut historical slurs.
Yes. Yeah. That's why I don't really want to read a lot of them.
Just don't read any of them.
A couple of them are more contemporary and are actually still in use.
Right. Exactly.
But these are the names of paintings. Like, the first one I'm looking at is in the collection of the MFA Boston. There are some that are in the collection of the Met.
There's some in Boston, huh?
They're an important thing to analyze. I felt weird about making this episode because part of me feels like I'm not qualified to speak on something like this, but I also think it's important for people to acknowledge that this happened because, like, I'm majority European. It's like maybe my ancestors did this, you know? Like, I think it's something that it's important to look at because this wasn't a different race of people. This wasn't a different planet. This was in our last fucking couple hundred years. This is the kind of thing that our society is built on. So I think it's important to analyze. But yeah, essentially this was telling people this is where you belong in society, and it was very appealing to Europeans that were looking to colonize the region. So yeah. And then my analysis is of their clothes, but you can see it in their body language, in like who's making eye contact with who the kids are looking towards, if the child's dressed like the parent is. There are a lot of tells that explain what their ranking is in this. So my next slide just says exactly what I just said. Blah, 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 blah. So this is the first image that I'm looking at. I don't know if you already pulled it up.
I haven't seen that one.
This is one that's in the MFA Boston's collection. I just read off the title. It's by Spanish painter Ignacio de Castro. And it was made in 1775. This painting is interesting from a clothing perspective, like a fashion history perspective. We see a 3-person family unit composed of a Spaniard father and indigenous Latin American mother. Their son is standing between them and looks like a combination of the two. So it doesn't seem very nefarious at first, but his clothing and some of the subtle details of his mother's change this painting from a simple depiction of a family to a piece of colonial propaganda. His brown skin tone indicates that his mother is the woman in the picture holding his shoulder, and they're both wearing red, which is kind of a connecting line between them. But he's wearing an outfit identical to his father's with an open front button waistcoat and tri-cornered hat, typical of 18th century men's fashion in Europe. But what makes this painting more interesting is, I think, his mom's outfit. She's wearing what looks to me to maybe be a transparent huipil, which is a common traditional garment in Mexico and Central America, over a European colonial women's dress. And she's also wearing a head covering, which could be a mantilla, which is a liturgical veil brought by Spanish Catholic women to New Spain. So she's wearing a mixture of...
Oh, she's wearing the European religious garb
as
instead
well as
of
Central
indigenous.
American traditional clothing.
Oh, okay.
The most interesting part to me, though, is if you see... Are you looking at the picture now?
Yeah.
If you see on her face, there's that little black dot, looks like a mole.
I see it.
That's called a chicadore. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right, but I think I am. It's an artificial mole made of tortoiseshell or fabric, such as silk or velvet, which would be applied to the wearer's face to hide scars. This practice began in Spain and was brought to Latin America. Became more common in Latin America after. So this indicates that the woman's become mobile in her station, joining her husband and son in European culture, but the title of the painting reinforces that she'll never fully leave her social station as an indigenous person.
So this isn't a paint, like, to me, because if I saw this, I would be like, oh, it's like a colonial guy with a little kid and an indigenous woman.
Yeah.
But what it is a painting of is a colonial man who has had a child with this woman, and she is assimilating into European culture.
But she won't ever be fully accepted into European culture at the same time.
And you can kind of, there's a kind of duality in the landscape, because behind the man is this giant, empty, raw landscape. Like, oh, look at what you get to have, all this land. But behind her, there's like a castle wall. So it's kind of like,
that's really interesting.
hey,
and
come on and put your fucking castle in this big empty land.
And the scene behind the sun is a tree, like indicating maybe growth. But if you really think about it and you read into what they're wearing and the way they're looking, I mean, my analysis is mostly on clothes, but if you look at their body language too, the mother is looking to her son and holding his shoulder. He has one eye covered like he's crying or looking forward. He's looking at his dad, holding his mother's hand, pulling her ahead. And the father is looking at the sun with his finger pointed towards the open land, as if he's leading them towards something.
Right, and he's, thus us viewers, or the 1800s Spanish viewers, are supposed to look at him and be like, he's looking at the viewer being like, hey, look at what I got.
What this is supposed to indicate is that he's leading them towards civilization. He's leading them towards colonization, essentially.
Oh, so we're supposed to, as colonial white people, we're supposed to look at him and be like, yeah, I want to be that guy. I want to go save an indigenous lady and give her a house and own a farm.
Or if you were somebody looking at this that was not a white European man, you would see they're heading towards progress. That was the idea of colonial ideology in the first place, is that you're bringing education, you're bringing Christianity or Catholicism in this case. Like, you're bringing culture to these people and you're saving them. That was the kind of racist colonial mentality that made people think that they had a right to do this in the first place.
Right.
So, yeah, it's interesting because it's deceiving. Like, the painting at first doesn't even look that strange, especially if you're a contemporary viewer who's not really clocking that a mixed race family might be on purpose. Like, this doesn't look bad in contemporary eye.
If these were like modern people, like it was like a guy and like he was like a finance bro guy, was like standing in like a fucking, a rural raw landscape with like an indigenous lady like wearing like AirPods and an Apple Watch.
Yeah.
And like a mixed race child with them. Maybe, you know what I mean? And it was like an advertisement, like come to Guatemala.
Yeah.
Free land grants for all white men over the age of 29 or something.
Yeah.
I'm laughing at just it's an incredulous laugh, not laughing at the horror and pain of this. I don't mean to make light of it.
Well, I'm going to get to this later, but it's actually interesting. There's a few artists that have in very recent years, like since the 2015, 2010s, started making contemporary versions of Casta paintings to call out that racist history as indigenous artists.
So, okay, we're gonna look at some of those.
I have a few of them. The project prompt was to make a virtual exhibition, so I have some artworks in my exhibition, quote unquote.
Then you didn't make them; you found them.
Yeah.
To curate them. Oh, okay, cool.
No, I didn't make a Casta painting.
No, I don't know if you like. Well, I guess it's not like a studio class.
Yeah. This is a PowerPoint.
All right. Next, slide 3 then.
We're on slide 10, actually.
Oh, shit. Okay, slide 10.
So the next image that I am talking about is Miguel Cabrera painting. This is from 1763. I'm like cringing naming the titles of these, but I want you guys to be able to look them up so you can think about what we're talking about. This one, unfortunately, is called From Spaniard in Black Mulatto by Miguel Cabrera, Miguel Cabrera. It's from 1763. It's oil on canvas in the Arts Drawer collection. So the body language in this piece, it's a lot more rendered, you'll notice.
Is it this?
Yep, yeah. That piece is interesting because they're sitting together, they look like they're talking to each other. They seem like more of a family, even though the racial contrast is much more stark in this painting. This time we see a Spaniard father and a black mother. In this work, the father is dressed in a distinctly European way, but this time he does not appear as wealthy as the man in the first painting. His broad-brimmed hat is protection from the sun. In addition, his clothing are not dyed in bright colors as the wealthy person's might be, but are instead a modest brown.
He's like a farmer.
Yeah, he's a low-income man, lower in status than other Spaniards might be, despite being of Spanish descent. The woman in this painting is depicted as very dark-skinned in an actually unrealistic way. Her skin tone blends in some places with her black veil and shawl in a way that it wouldn't in that lighting normally. I noticed this painting again as adoption of European Catholicism. Her hand is curled in a position you often see in religious paintings, especially of Mother Mary. I don't know if that's intentional, but I thought it was interesting. She's also looking directly at her husband, whose eyes to their son. The most interesting detail in this work is her head covering. This could represent her African heritage, as those head coverings weren't uncommon in Africa at the time due to the spread of Islam, and for functionality in the heat. But it could also be a Catholic veil, like the woman we saw in the first case could have been, worn commonly by religious women for modesty. So this could have come from different areas in her life. It could have been a marking of colonization, or it could have been actually just something that she was already wearing. Interestingly, their child is wearing more traditional Latin American clothing, with a blue shirt with ruffles at the base and what appears to be a patterned smock over a white long-sleeve shirt. And they're eating fruit from the mother's basket held at her side.
Do you think that's supposed to be a little girl in a dress?
So I wasn't sure, but I think the title of the painting is written on the top. I saw this in the collection that I looked at it as they're referred to as a mulatto, but this says mulatta, which indicates feminine gender.
Oh, so this is probably their daughter.
I think so. I actually wrote in my essay that it was a son, but I think I'm wrong. 'Cause I do think she's wearing a dress. But yeah, so I think there's something to be said about her hair being cropped short. It's kind of interesting.
Well, yeah. Huh.
So the child might represent the future of New Spain following interracial marriage or interracial relationships, making this painting a little less dark than the previous one, despite most depictions of black individuals and this one being pretty racist. Like, this child is leaning into their father, but they're still eating from the mother's basket. The mother looks involved. They're all together. They're both dressed really nicely, despite the fact that the father is wearing like kind of more farm clothes, and they're still depicted as outside. But to your point, the mother is still against a wall, which is kind of interesting. And they're most likely wearing clothes that are natural to their backgrounds. Like, they don't seem to have appeared more colonized. Which I found kind of interesting about that piece.
Yeah, this is kind of doing the same thing where, the creators of this or the commissioners of this are advertising. This is essentially historical advertising. Like, we're looking at it as fine art and talking about art analysis, but what else would this be? I mean, this is trying to get people, like, this is the common man, a man working the fields, who's going to go buy his own land and be a self-starter and marry an indigenous woman and
Well, she's not an indigenous woman.
Where is she from?
This woman is black, indicating that she was at one point in the transatlantic slave trade at this time period, 1763.
But she... Oh, right, because they made her black, that implies that she would have been a black person who ended up on that continent.
Yeah.
Because of the transatlantic slave trade, and then eventually became the wife of this man.
Yeah. It's not indicated in the painting that she is enslaved, but she could have been at the time. This was painted in 1763, and the title specifically refers to her as black.
I see, but the thing, I guess what I'm saying though is that this is an ad for this land. Like, this is like saying to a random common man in Spain, like, you too, we have land for you as well. I think
a more apt comparison, like, you're right, but I think what would be a little less direct is it serves the same purpose as maybe a Norman Rockwell painting would serve. Like, this is the idealized version from a Spanish colonialist perspective of what this life is like.
Well, and I understand the comparison, but I mean, like, yeah, I don't think that's different. I don't think that's really different from what I'm saying. I guess, like, I feel like these were shown in Spain to Spanish people when they were trying to get people to join the colonization efforts of South America, right?
Yeah.
So I guess all I'm saying is that, like, this painting feels like, to me, like it's like meant to be seen by this type of man that would be in this picture, for him to be inspired to go there and do this, right?
Yeah, it wasn't directly used in ads as like a one-to-one like sales thing, but it was definitely a form of propaganda and social control, and it was a kind of an economic justification. I'm quoting ChatGPT right now, but the Spanish justified the dispossession of indigenous lands through concepts like the civilizing mission, and Casta paintings indirectly supported these ideas by portraying indigenous and mixed-race peoples as subordinate to Spanish elites. So it definitely cleared the conscience of someone who might be considering doing this. It was definitely helpful to colonization that these existed. It was the intention of them. But this
this is essentially just right-wing propaganda from the 1830s.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. It's like, this could even be compared to Nazi propaganda from the Third Reich, or even like Stalin propaganda, where you might see a picture of Hitler, with a little child on his lap reading a book to a group of school children with like a rainbow behind him.
Yeah.
It kind of feels similar to that.
Yep. Yeah. There's also, I didn't write a paragraph on this, but there's a lot of depictions of black women specifically being violent or angry from Casta paintings and some of the lesser known ones. One example is Andrés Deislas. Andrés Deislas.
Can you say it again? D-E what?
D-E space I-S-L-A-S. Elas.
Okay.
André de Elas. From a Spaniard in black, a mulatto is born 1774. Which, if you're looking at it, it's a painting of a visibly very wealthy, apparently Spanish man. A black woman, yes. And she's beating him with what looks like a spoon or something in a kitchen. She's pulling on his ear, and her daughter
is trying to like protect him.
She's
something.
like screaming and trying to protect him. Yeah. Which this is another example of the child following the father's footsteps. She's wearing European clothes. She's trying to defend the father against the mother. She's beating him for some reason that's not explained. It's just a really racist and negative depiction.
Is this supposed to be like folksy and funny? Like
I don't know what the intention was. Well, most of these paintings, unless there's context from the time that I don't really understand, they weren't intended as and funny's not the right word, but like they were more of like a codification of race. Like this was supposed to be somewhat accurate. So this falls into a very long history of depictions.
Like this is what will happen if you do this? Well, how would this encourage? Why would this encourage somebody to go do this if this is what's going to happen?
Well, that wasn't exactly the main point. This is an example of indicating that European people are more civilized. This was just a glaring example of misogynoir.
Misogynoir?
Yeah.
What's that? I don't know that word.
Misogyny specifically against black women.
Massage and noir?
Misogynoir. Like misogyny, noir, black.
Massage noir. Oh, I've never heard that before. That's interesting.
Misogynoir. Misogynoir.
And you say that as one word?
Mm-hmm. Yep, look.
Massage noir.
Like misogyny, misogynoir.
I get it. Oh, that's an interesting word. I've never heard it before.
Well, there's a lot of feminist literature specifically about the depiction of black women in the fact that, like, this does happen with white women, but it's way less common, is the depiction of them being, like, violent, being scary, being territorial. Like, those are all racist depictions that are applied to black men and black women, but especially to black women. Because this idea of, like, forced femininity or, like, the woman's role in a social hierarchy would be to be motherly, to be maternal, to be soft, to be gentle, to be comforting. So this idea of, like, the black wife hitting the husband over the head with a spoon and yelling at him while their child is trying to protect the father is a textbook example of colonial racist propaganda. It's a pretty dark fucking painting, actually. It probably was intended to be funny at the time, but it was also
it's super
mainly
creepy.
Yeah, it's like it falls into.
Because the guy looks like a freak too.
Yeah.
Because like he has white hair and a black mustache, which implies that he has a powdered wig on.
Oh, interesting. I didn't think of that.
I mean, probably, right?
Yeah, there's a tri-cornered hat on the floor behind him too.
Yeah, but even still, if like it's like a white-haired guy, like it also almost makes you wonder, like, during this time, a 40-year-old woman wouldn't be having children, right? So like this is probably the woman attacking him is probably a young woman.
That's possible.
Because she has a young girl and she's married.
Well,
and why would this scumbag, colonial piece of shit guy that's trying to own people and colonize land marry an older woman?
This actually gets a lot darker than that.
Oh, yeah?
They're not necessarily married.
Oh, she could be some kind of concubine.
These are just mother, father, child units. They're not traditional families.
Okay, totally. But I guess what I'm pointing out is that, like, that guy could be anywhere from 10 to 40 years older than that girl, too.
She could be a slave.
She could be a slave. She could be a 13-year-old. You know what I mean? Like that. There's not anything
Yeah.
saying like, oh, and she's 18.
And the title of the painting reinforces that their child is of a lower social caste. Like that's actually, I didn't want to write about it in
Than
my
him?
essay because it was like, oh, then all of them. Yeah.
Then the mom too.
I don't actually know.
I think the child.
I think the mom
probably
would be
a
in-
higher social status.
Yeah, I don't really know.
Anywho, that's probably neither here nor there.
I think that they were both depicted as bad in this context. I guess it depends on your perspective. Because I know that if you were talking specifically about colorism, maybe, but I know that there was also like some of the colonialist views were that being mixed race was worse than being. I don't know if that applies in this context. I don't really know. All of it's fucked up and racist, essentially, is what I'm saying. But yeah, this one's a pretty dark piece. And then there's one. Some of them are like less bad than others. Like that one's extremely dark. All of them are racist, but some of them are a little bit more like it's not showing the family unit specifically as having racial violence within it other than the existing social structure. That one, for example, like that's likely an enslaved woman with possibly someone who owns her in that situation. They're in a kitchen. It looks like they're in Europe. So pretty fucking horrible and dark, like absolute worst case scenario.
It also seems like she's wearing the same dress as the woman in the first painting that's owned by the MFA.
Oh, that's interesting.
It
Yeah.
seems to be the same exact dress.
I don't know. Don't quote me on this 'cause I didn't do research on this, but I think that the use of red, it appears that red skirts are like a shorthand to indicate an indigenous woman.
I mean,
So-
that makes sense because in a lot of Western art, red dresses are used to indicate that it's like a bad woman, like a fallen woman
interesting.
of some way. It
Yeah.
goes back to like Mary Magdalene. It starts at Mary Magdalene and goes all the way to fucking Scarlet Witch and WandaVision, where like the idea that like it's like film and art shorthand that like, oh, if this is like a bad girl or an unpredictable girl or
Yeah.
a gay woman, we're gonna make her red all the time.
That's really interesting. I've just looked up while we were talking about that red and indigenous clothing specifically, like within their actual culture. And it often symbolizes blood, vitality, connection to the earth, and indigenous tradition in Latin America.
So like indigenous Latin Americans would use red that way?
Yeah, used in like ceremonial context to honor ancestors, celebrate life cycles, or connect with spiritual forces because it was difficult to get red dye.
So that's like well and good, but I mean, are we really going to give the Spanish painters that made this, like, do we really think that they knew that? Like, they probably
No.
didn't fucking know that.
No, but I think that in some cases, these depictions are just a stripped down, like complete lack of context stereotype of what they saw.
Oh, like maybe they're using red because they saw the women wearing red.
Yeah, I'm also seeing that
That probably wasn't editorial, is what you're saying.
it could be both. They could have seen the red and read it that way because that was the European like meaning behind it. But
Right.
apparently, indigenous peoples of Mesoamerica, particularly the Aztecs and Maya, were skilled in harvesting and processing. I don't know how to pronounce this, but I've seen this before. Cochineal to produce brilliant scarlet and crimson hues. So they're the dried bodies of insects that were found on prickly pear cacti in that region. And there's also some red-based clays that are in that region and hematite, which is a mineral-based pigment. So it was naturally occurring, and people did use it to dye clothes in that area, probably more than in Europe because those insects and the cacti were not accessible to them. So I think both things are true, and that might have actually led to some of the stereotypes that we see today. It's kind of an interesting thing to consider. But yeah, to indigenous people, it was actually considered a really beautiful color and one that was like held in reverence. But you're right, in European
I
tradition.
mean, it certainly is a beautiful color. A red dress or red detailing in a dress is excellent.
In European tradition, though, you're totally right. It either meant a royal person because it was inaccessible and difficult to buy, or in the case of a woman, usually like a Mary Magdalene type.
Well, it also depends on country too, because in England, for example, red was like very stately and proper, right?
Right, yeah.
But in Spain, I don't know about what red meant in Spain.
Well, that's an interesting connection, too, when you're thinking about these paintings, because red was a connector to Catholicism, and it was also in the Spanish flag. So it depends on the context, the way you're looking at it.
Yeah, because there could be some patriotic elements with Spanish because we are like, as like East Coast Americans, heavily, our brains are, as like East Coast white people, we're probably very much like thinking of things Britishly. Like when we see red, like when I was seeing the guys wearing red, I'm like, oh, they're like British guys, but like that's not true because these are Spanish paintings. Why would they be featuring British people?
That's interesting, actually, yeah.
Because like that's a kind of You know, like I just found this random fucking picture, like
Yeah.
like there's a child wearing a red coat.
Well, that makes us think of the American Revolution. It's an instant association, the red button-down coat and the tri-cornered hat.
Yeah, so and that's probably why the fuck would they be thinking about that? The Spanish people colonizing fucking Mexico. They're not like thinking about like British people and American stuff, right?
Probably not, no. Although
so the red is like could be even a red herring where we're like kind of looking at it like we're like seeing too much in it even because we're like maybe giving it too much.
Well, it depends on the context. Like, that's what's kind of interesting about this. Like, if we go back to our first painting from Ignacio de Castro, the woman that's wearing red in this picture is likely wearing red in an indigenous context. Like, the red full skirt with the huipil on top, that's not very far from Mexican tradition. It's the tri-cornered hat that her son is wearing, the chicadore on her cheek, the artificial mole, like those kinds of things, and the quarter sleeve shirt with the frills, those all indicate European colonization, but the huipil and the red skirt might actually not be, which is why these paintings are interesting, because the way that these things are being worn and what they represent is very culturally dependent and context dependent in these images, because some of them, like the woman that I was just talking about, she's wearing a combination of indigenous Mexican clothing and the clothing of European Spaniards. And then Catholicism adds another tear to it too, like the head coverings and the color red and things like that are in all cultures, or both cultures discussed.
I don't know if I'm drawing a line where one doesn't exist, but they kind of remind me of Frida Kahlo dresses.
Yeah. She's Mexican.
Right, of course. But I don't know if I'm just imagining Frida, like I'm just making it up. But
no, she painted herself in red a lot.
Well, no, I'm just saying the dresses because I'm like, I'd have to look at them specifically. No, yeah, I'm looking at Frida Kahlo paintings, and the dresses aren't like that similar to the ones we were just looking at.
But the color palette is. That's why these paintings are a combination, and they're also not presented by people from these cultures. They're presented by Spanish painters. So
Right.
It's a
Could be
garbled
bullshit.
version anyway. What am I looking at right now? Oh, well, I was just going to show you, though, this dress shape. I'm sorry to the viewer who can't see this, but this is from an article about Frida Kahlo, and it's a huipil. This shape right here, this like squarish part around the neck and the t-shirt kind of shape with the long dress at the bottom. This is a traditional color palette and a traditional shape. And that's in the first painting that we were talking about. This might be wrong. This is all observational for me, and I learned all of this while doing this report. But the square dress she's wearing over the colonial women's dress looks like a Mexican huipil, which was traditional and hailed from before these paintings were made.
Interesting.
So this could be an example of a Spanish painter who did not understand this culture, was just looking at it observationally, painting it on without even realizing that he was codifying Mexican indigenous clothing onto this colonial dress.
And I get the feeling that these aren't live painting. Like, can you go back to one of them?
This one?
Yeah, like look at
Ignacio de Castro?
Look at their faces, for example. If
Yeah.
you zoom in on their faces, like you can really get the feeling that these aren't models.
Yeah, no.
Like that guy, that's like a made-up face.
Yep.
They're all made up, like in the way that like a random Greek fucking head.
Yep.
Probably isn't a real guy. It's just a head study.
Yeah.
Which says to me that these paintings were probably made from sketches, perhaps by travelers and artists visiting the settlements,
Mm-hmm.
making the drawings, and then going back to studios to make these paintings. So it would make sense that they wouldn't like get the clothes accurately because
Right.
they're just working from a sketch and they're probably not remembering or actually looking at the real garments in front of them.
I think I actually read that, one of the articles I used to research this, but I'm not sure. But yeah, no, this was, some of these paintings were also, I'd imagine, made in Spain from people who hadn't even been to New Spain or to Mexico and Central America. So, yeah.
Oh, you think they were just making shit up?
Well, these are Spanish painters. I don't know where they were made, but some of it was observational, some of it was repeated from other people. Like, for example, this is kind of random, but the way that we see lions done in medieval paintings by people who'd never been to anywhere a lion would be.
Right.
It's a telephoned version of other cultures with European Spanish Catholicism as the main stage. And again, these were only made in the like mid to late 1700s. This is a 18th century specific colonial aesthetic because
Oh.
it served that function.
I was imagining this happening during like the Civil War or before the Civil War.
In the U.S.?
Yeah.
Well, we have images similar to this in our colonial period, but this is...
No. I thought this was happening simultaneously.
No. This was
this
during
was
the
from
original...
1700s.
Yeah.
Oh, so this is like peak fucking...
This was while it was happening, yeah.
Okay.
Because... Hold on, let me just double check before I say this again. Yeah, I was right. New Spain, the Spanish colony in the Americas, ended in 1821 when it became the independent nation of Mexico. And then the Mexican Revolution was in 1910 to 1920. So this regime fell by the early 1800s. So these only existed from the time that they came there to when they were essentially kicked out. But by the time that there were already people that were second, third, fourth generation Spaniard, indigenous, or African, or whatever. This kind of mixing had already been happening, so they had a more mixed culture with Spanish influence, which leads to the really colorful culture that they have in Central America now and Latin America. But yeah, I have a few more examples of Casta paintings, but I think you get the picture. But to just touch on something I think is kind of interesting, contemporary artists, Nancy Friedman Sanchez and Delia Montoya are both artists that I found that are working with the Casta painting template now to make contemporary artworks that show their experience as people from Mexico or family from Mexico.
What's one of them I should look up?
Delia Montoya. We can look at that one first.
Delia?
Oh, Delilah. I'm sorry. Delilah Montoya. This piece is just a Casta series. There's a lot of them. This one's Casta number 1, and it's in the National Museum of Mexican Art. It's a contemporary piece. I found this on her website, and I actually didn't find a date, but based on the photo, it looks like the image itself at least was taken in the 90s or early 2000s.
I'm looking at pictures of like a pool room.
That's right, but that's not the one I'm looking at. I saw that one too, though. This was Casta number 1. They're in a church. So what this is a wood curio box with dye sublimation photo on metal, test tubes and colored sand, and a map. So
the church one?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's a photo, which if you were to look at it, again, this is Delilah Montoya, Casta number 1, if the listener wants to look it up. But it's a picture of the inside of a small church or chapel. It's a Catholic church, and there are 4 family members on the left and 6 on the right. Some of them are sitting, some of them are standing. They're in contemporary clothing, a t-shirt, jeans, a little floral shirt, that kind of thing. And they're looking at 2 children that are in the center. One of them is holding up what looks like a Bible, and the other one is holding a cross on a long pole. I want to say that these are like altar boys. One of them is a girl, but you might know more about this than me. You're actually Catholic.
Well, altar boys, I think girls do it too.
Okay. Well,
I think it's just you have to be a child to do it.
Okay. That's interesting. But yeah, it's part of a Catholic mass, and the people in the church are looking at the kids that are in the center, and they're proceeding towards the viewer who's standing in the back of the church. And it's inlaid in the top segment of a wooden box, a wood curio box. And below it, there's a map, which is labeled Ancestral Migration, Castro 1. And there are 2 test tubes on either side of that, mounted as if they were candles, but they're full of colored sand. This is 38 inches by 36 inches at the National Museum of Mexican Art. So, due to the incredibly divisive and racially charged nature of the Spanish caste system in New Spain, and Mexico's becoming independent and eradicating the Spanish colony in 1821, Casta paintings obviously fell out of favor. They were no longer made at all by the 19th century. The racial discrimination that was the root of this art movement, of course, lasted, had a lasting impact on Mexico. Contemporary artists in the 21st century have begun to engage with that format once again, this time as a reclamation of Mexican identity rather than as an embrace of the colonial racist perspective. So in this series, which is actually on view from this summer, August 10th, 2024, to March 16th, 2025, at the National Museum of Mexican Art, Chicana artist Delilah Montoya, who was born in 1955, explores her Mexican ancestry by creating contemporary family portraits, juxtaposing them with the title and therefore history of Casta's paintings. In this painting, the clothing of the subjects, along with the background context, shows us that the 2 children in the center are participating in a contemporary Catholic Mass, Catholicism having been brought from Spain in the colonial era. The people around them, implied by the series thesis to be family members, are wearing clothing that placed them somewhere around the mid-90s and late 2000s. And this work is actually a multimedia piece, incorporating a sound element, and the results of a DNA test. So this combats the racial emphasis colonizing Spanish artists displayed in their work. Oh, colonial Spanish artists displayed in their work. So that's actually on her website. I haven't listened to it, and I want to play it for you guys, but I don't want to.
What?
That might be a copyright issue.
What is it?
The painting comes with this audio.
Is it is it like a popular song? What is it?
It's a family monologue.
How long is it?
1 minute and 15 seconds.
Fuck it, play it. Yeah, turn your volume up all the way on your thing. And maybe, probably, I doubt it.
All right, we're doing this for the sake of your education.
I mean, unless this artist just fucking, for some reason, is like gravely upset by us playing this, then I don't see a problem.
I guess. But so each of these images has a hyperlink.
Like there
on
isn't
her
anything
website.
on the website saying do not fucking reproduce this or anything, right? That you can see.
I mean, no, but
all right, we're good.
Implied. But if you click on each painting, they come with a family monologue that goes with each image. So in this extended family, the father and the mother's brother were tested for the Casta portrait. So they're actually in this image. The father's on the far left, and the mother's brother is on the far right. So they were DNA tested for this.
Can I see the image real quick?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm at the right one. Oh, we're still on that one. Shit.
Yeah,
okay.
Same image. So each of these comes with a family story, a family monologue associated with two people in the image, and the DNA test tracking the migration of their ancestors. So it ties in with that the kind of racial caste system perspective, but instead of presenting it in a way that reinforces like European Spanish hierarchy or superiority, this is more of a reclamation of that idea, and it is a way of being proud of the ancestry of the people that are in the painting while they talk about their own descent. So I actually haven't listened to this audio clip, but I'll play it for you guys right now. This is with Casta painting number 1 by Delilah Montoya.
I would call myself a Spaniard, and I got all kinds of blood. But my ancestors, they probably were told that they had come from Spain, but it could have come from Mexico. What I see here is a church where I was baptized, confirmed. I attended there until I got married. People I see here are my relatives. Left side of the picture, I see my wife, Andrea, my daughter, and my brother, Perez, my oldest brother, are look to the center, where my grandson and my granddaughter are walking the aisle. Maria Elena is standing on the right side, and then my daughter Natalie is sitting in front of her. And my sister and my brother-in-law Tony and his wife Emma. 3 of my daughters are here. The oldest is missing. My father was born what we call the Llano Quemado, which is north of here, and my mother was born here. My wife is from Llano Largo. It's on the uppers.
I used to love horseback riding. Oh, I loved it. They would put me on a horse with this big old funny sacks that they used to have, and I had to go up a hill, but I had to go pick up peas and come home. But it was interesting. I think now, I wish you had known that life a little bit, Yeah.
That's actually, I think it adds a lot more to the piece to listen to that. I hadn't heard it before. But yeah, so this is kind of taking that template and flipping it on its head to give voice to an actual person from the region rather than colonizing forces.
Yeah,
And,
these paintings, man, they do
they're dark.
they're pretty fucking yeah, 'cause when we were looking at them before and you were saying they were dark, I was like, yeah, I guess so. But now they kind of remind me of like Black Americana.
That's the exact same thing, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, not
just-
to be insanely
just
dark,
not
but since we're
American.
already there, these figures they serve the same purpose that a mammy doll might serve. It's
Yeah,
typecasting
exactly.
people by race into a certain social class.
Right, yeah. You got that right for sure.
So pretty dark.
I
But,
wonder, like, 'cause the thing with a lot of these too is they're clearly like large oil paintings or frescoes or something.
Mostly oil and canvas ones I've seen.
So I wonder like where a lot of these are.
In museums.
Hmm.
This is, you would find these if you were in a museum. Some of them are in the Museum of Fine Arts Boston. Some of them are in the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Of
From my
course, the
assignment
Met.
anyway, but well, these are important pieces of colonial history. I mean, if we're going to talk about colonialism, we can't just talk about the silver spoons and fucking like George Washington. We have to talk about the shit they actually did. And this isn't North America, this is Central America, but this is what they did, you know?
Right. A lot of like people in our area, especially like no offense, but just like idiot people, just like they're like, oh, the Spanish, and they're like talking about Brazilian people.
Yeah.
Or like just anybody that's like some from South America or Central America in some way, and
Yeah.
they like don't even realize that like Spain is like a white European country.
Yeah.
Like
Or Portuguese.
yeah, like the Spanish and Portuguese are white Europeans that
Mhm.
colonized Central and South America.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and then they're like, oh, the Spanish. Oh, they're, I don't know. Like, it's just like,
Well, this is interesting though, because this is where, if you were to expand on those racial hierarchies, in North America, like in the United States, that European white British figure supersedes Spanish colonialism. Like
can you say that again? What do you mean? I didn't get it.
in this racial hierarchy in North America, like in the United States, the British colonial figure supersedes the Spanish colonialism
Oh.
in the hierarchy of the way that things were seen at the time. Like
the
white expansion overtook that. Like when people moved into the Western U.S.
yeah.
in the 1800s, that destruction of culture, like we took over and destroyed a lot of indigenous culture and also Spanish culture that colonized the indigenous people.
Right, yeah, because I don't think the British had any like sympathies or love for the Spanish people or culture in Europe. I don't know why they would give. They were probably enemies.
Well, a lot of people consider that one and the same. Like in California, Mexican culture, indigenous Native American culture, Spanish culture, like all of those things, a lot of white people that moved into the region at the time just saw that as like California native. They didn't understand that was the mixing of multiple different cultural backgrounds and languages
Oh yeah,
and
like
histories.
horses.
Huh?
I'm pretty sure like horses, for example, were like I think like maybe prehistorically in America at one point, but then went extinct, and then the Spanish reintroduced them.
I think that you said that, yeah.
Or the Spanish, I forget. It was like some weird thing about, yeah.
Well, I have one more example of a contemporary Casta painting.
But yeah, the Spanish did fucking massively influence the Americas, didn't they?
Yeah.
Let me get the name of this last Casta painting.
This is Nancy Friedemann Sanchez. So that's Nancy, Nancy, Friedemann Sanchez, Friedemann hyphen SAN.
Wait, hold on. I'm stuck on the middle name.
Well, it's a
Nancy
hyphenated last name.
Fried.
Friedemann
Oh, Sanchez.
Yeah, hyphen Sanchez with a Z.
Friedemann Sanchez.
This piece that I'm looking at here, it's by Nancy Friedemann Sanchez, and it's called Tornatras Ink on Tyvek, Spanish comb and mask. It's 80 inches by 40 inches, and it was made in 2020, currently owned by the artist. So that's also from a series, but that one in specific is what I'm talking about. Yes. So Nancy Friedemann Sanchez is both Colombian and American. This piece is from a series called Pinturas de Casta and the Construction of American Identity, which references Casta painting to examine ways that racial discrimination of the colonial era still impacts Latin American people today. In this series, Friedemann Sanchez invited Latina women to pose in a style that mimics a TSA search, referencing the racist suspicion that some Europeans and white Americans hold toward Hispanic individuals. The flowers the figure is wearing, almost like a headdress, is a reference to the indigenous resin technique mopa mopa, or barniz de pasto, which is an ancient traditional craft that is unique to southern Colombia's highlands. That's because mopa mopa resin, which is used for this art form, is sourced from the mopa mopa tree, which is found only in Andes Mountains, and the art form often incorporates floral imagery. The artist also states that the masks the figures wear are sourced from third-party sellers online who aren't treating the works with care and respect, like Facebook Marketplace or eBay. She chooses these specifically because they were taken from their place of origin and displaced without provenance. The use of animal and human imagery incorporated into the same form is a reference, and I apologize for even saying this, but it's in our artist statement, to the racist term half-breed, likening BIPOC individuals to animals. Simultaneously, though, it is a reference to the overlapping habitats of humans and animals in nature, which was central to many indigenous religions prior to Christian colonization. By embracing these stereotypes and reworking them to create something beautiful, the artist leverages the loaded history of Casta's paintings and turns them into something that evokes strength of indigenous peoples, rather than the themes of 18th century Castas, which is more typically indigenous peoples' domination at the hands of Spanish colonial power.
Yeah, there's like a whole series of these, and they're all pretty spooky.
They're strong pieces, yeah.
Or do you think these must be like, these are probably life-size figures, right? Because the mask is probably the size of a human face.
Yeah.
So they're probably life-size.
Well, the way these are made is the artist had Latina women lay on the Tyvek.
Oh, I gotcha. These are tracings of people.
Yeah. there was more. I didn't include this in my writing, but I saw on the artist's website too that the texture of the painting is also important. She had them all like covered in like an ink. The ink was used to create a stained aesthetic, which is a reference to colonial justifications of genocide through the church's assumption that darker-skinned indigenous people lacked a soul and were stained. As the inks dried, they created patterns like an aesthetic of animal stripes, spots, and water systems, which speaks to the merging of human and animal and human in nature, which was prevalent in many indigenous belief systems prior to the induction of Christianity. It also references the othering of interracial people. That's from the artist statement on her website.
Damn.
Yeah, really, really strong work. Yeah, so I have sources for all these things. If anybody's interested in them, contact me on Instagram, and I can actually send you my PowerPoint if you want.
Well, by the way, what was the first artist name that we discussed?
The first one was, I think, Ignacio de Castro.
Oh, wait, no, I missed.
Oh, the first contemporary artist?
Yes.
Delilah Montoya, I think. Yeah, Delilah Montoya. And that was Casta number 1. And I don't know if any of our listeners are going to be in Mexico anytime soon, but if you get there before March 16th of 2025, which is my dad's birthday also, you can see these works on view, which is kind of cool.
I just followed both of the artists on our Instagram.
Cool.
So we can tag them when we yeah, maybe before we'll use some of the photos of their pieces from your slide. Maybe you could save them along with some of the other Casta examples.
I feel weird using colonial Casta paintings as our thumbnails because they're racist as fuck.
Well, okay, so I won't.
I'm going to leave it to the viewer to look that up. And again, if you want to be in touch with me about the PowerPoint.
Yeah, that's actually something to consider. Maybe you could Google real quick. Like, because if you posted a Black Americana image, it would be, like, abhorrent and make people really upset to see. These are the same. Like, you shouldn't post these. They'll make people really upset.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I also just, like, don't want to. I think it'd be bad.
I know. I totally get it. But I just wanted to make sure that we, because we are going to have to post something.
I mean, I could create a shareable link to my PowerPoint so you can see the images we talked about. It also has a lot of links attached for further research.
Yeah, okay. This isn't my... That's okay. I was just going to say my concern that I was raising is not really that big of a deal anyway. So.
They can Google it. These are easily accessible. I just Googled Casta paintings and these came up. And that's Casta paintings.
Well, this was interesting. I had never heard of these before.
I hadn't either. At first I thought they were really cool, and then I found out what they were, and I was disappointed. But I think it's important to...
What's unfortunate about them is that they do look kind of interesting. Like visually. Like they're like very interesting studies of outfits and clothes and stuff.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting, especially the first painting that I talked about. I was really, really intrigued by the chicadore, because I didn't know that was what it was. And if you look it up, there are a lot of examples of maybe more familiar-looking portraits, not colonial, but like more from... Oh, this sidebar, but to explain what I'm about to say. A trademark of colonial art, both in Central America and in Northern America, and maybe in other places too, I just know about those two, is that it's really flat and kind of like folk art looking because there weren't traditional schools of art there. So if you were a second-generation person born in New Spain, there wasn't anybody to teach you how to paint except for maybe one other guy, you know what I mean? Versus in Europe, they have these histories of like 100-year-old art schools where they had this tradition passed down from like Greece and Rome. So the flat kind of two-dimensional cartoonish look is a trademark of any kind of colonial art source. But anyway, I was going to say maybe more rendered, maybe you're in the typical European style paintings of women sitting for portraits with powdered wigs and big dresses in Spain with chicadore on. So I was kind of confused about the origin at first, but I found an article about it that is pretty interesting. It is called Beauty in the Eye of the Beholder, Fashion in 18th Century Mexico, from the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. You can find it on lacma.org, and it tells you all about it, along with some other indigenous clothing that are represented in Casta paintings.
Thank you.
Did you just zone out?
No, I'm just chilling. I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is really like...
It's interesting, right?
I mean, I love that era of art. Like, I really love, I love European paintings from the 17 and 1800s and the American 1800s. And despite the aesthetics or, despite my admiration for that art, it is like, a sobering reminder that not all of it was aesthetics. A lot of it was propaganda. A lot of it was a tool of colonization. A lot of it was soft power kind of tools of assimilation.
Right.
And that's fucking just so fucking just sad. It
So-
just is, and it makes you look at them in just a totally different way. It's upsetting.
To actually deepen your point too, I finally just actually looked up where these paintings were displayed at the time that they were made.
Yeah.
Private homes of colonial elites, gifts to Spanish authorities, including viceroys and other high-ranking government figures in both the colonies and in Spain. They were meant to demonstrate diversity and social order of the colonial society. They were also used in educational contexts at missionary schools and by colonial authorities to explain the existing caste system. They were put in scientific or, quote, natural history collections, museums in Europe. They were used by religious institutions, such as churches or monasteries, reflecting the role of the Catholic Church in maintaining colonial order. And they were used just for display, tools of propaganda aimed at emphasizing the civilizing mission of the Spanish and showcasing how mixed-race populations could assimilate into Spanish culture if they were treated correctly.
Yeah, I think there might be a visual language that was missing as well as us modern people looking at something so old, that these paintings had like a political purpose.
Yeah.
Versus like now it would be really stupid to just make a bunch of paintings right now for political purpose. Like
Yeah.
they wouldn't go beyond a gallery or like a t-shirt run.
Well, I want to reinforce, too, that these weren't like one-to-one, like you'd get a pamphlet about this if you were thinking about moving to the colonies.
Right.
Maybe you would see it in that context, but this is more to make a really dark contemporary association. This is more like seeing a photo of like a girl in pigtails from Hingham giving food to an African child.
Yeah.
Like this is
right.
white savior complex imagery. And this was to
Yeah.
make people feel good about colonizing this area.
I see. I understand better now.
It was probably used in that context too, but that was the reason why.
Wow.
It was to reinforce the idea that it was both ethical and morally required to colonize Latin America or Central America.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, it's not a fun thing to read about, but
I mean,
Again-
it's not the worst thing we've done an episode about.
have we?
we talked about some fucked up shit.
Well, I don't know. I just think that it's interesting and important to read about this stuff because, again, I can't hammer this home enough. New Spain stopped existing in 1810. Who else was painting in 1810? Van Gogh?
Maybe no. Yeah, maybe Van Gogh. I don't know actually.
I'm looking it up.
Is he not that old? Is he? He wouldn't be. Is he? If Van Gogh wasn't
Francisco-
born in the same 1700s.
Goya was painting around that time. We all learned about
I
Goya.
thought Goya was alive during like the Spanish Civil War.
He made a print series. He was considered the most important Spanish artist of the 18th and 19th centuries. Why is he on this list?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. He died in 1828.
Goya died in 1828.
1746.
What the fuck? Am I like on crack? I might have just totally fucked up like Goya's like existence and when he was alive. Why did I think he was alive for the early 20th century? Anyway, well, that was a fucking wow. Yeah, I'm a dumbass. He's like a colonial Spanish painter.
Yeah, he used to paint about the French army going into the Peninsular War against Spain.
Yeah, I fucking
He was at the same time as Napoleon.
right. I placed his war paintings in the wrong war in my mind. Like I
So-
saw his war paintings and was like, the Spanish Civil War.
That's a good example, though, dude. Like Napoleon, we learn about that. I mean, it's obviously old history, but it's not ancient history. Like, we can draw comparisons. People love to romanticize the era of Napoleon and think about how French culture has changed from that time to today, the ways that it's connected to today. 1810 was when New Spain fell. That's when people stopped making Casta paintings. That's when this hierarchy was less forcibly established. There are traces of this that still exist that affect us in the U.S., that affect people in Central America, that affect us everywhere. Like, I think it's really important to acknowledge the racist roots of the countries that we live in because it didn't go away. It's just changed form. Like, we just came up with an example of African missionaries. It's no different than the paintings that they're establishing here. It's the idea that white saviors can rescue the uncivilized people who don't understand Catholicism.
God damn it.
And that's why it's important that these things are on view in museums.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
There's another ethical question about which museums, but that's a whole other podcast
Right,
episode.
that's like a whole fucking dumb can of worms.
Well, I don't think it's dumb, but...
Well, I just mean it's like a fucking... like, it's like just an infinite Russian doll of conversation.
So, hey, speaking of that, I have an unrelated announcement to make. I am going to start uploading my essays to Substack.
All right.
And I'm also...
They're going to check. The people who listen to this are going to click on the link and check if you actually do it.
When are you airing this episode? Because I'm going to upload them the next few days.
Oh, this one, I mean, if we're going chronologically...
4 weeks?
Yeah. Well, I don't want the people to... I'm not trying to remind them that they're listening to technically old stuff.
End of January. It's probably the end of January.
Yeah, it's currently the end of January.
That's plenty of time.
Or beginning of February.
I'm back in school at January 21st, so I'm going to try to do this before then.
Well, people, look, don't complain or don't be upset that we're not recording these the exact same day that we post them.
Nobody is.
It's really
They're
hard
fine.
to do. And if you are doing that, it's
fucked.
just really hard to do that.
Can I sneak peek an article that I've been working on for like 7 hours today?
Yes.
I just have essay notes, but I'm going to finish it because I have it pretty much structured now. I just haven't written it yet. But thesis statement.
Thesis statement?
I'm going to write it before this episode airs, so I'm not spoiling it. Because I don't want somebody else to do it, because I looked it up, and I can't find on any scholarly article website or from ChatGPT anybody else writing about this. But my... here's my thesis. I'm going to edit it probably, but it's about... The title is Tumblr Realism, a forgotten art movement in the age of early social media. Years of this era that I'm declaring as an art era are 2012 to 2015, approximately. My thesis draft is... The Tumblr Realism movement, roughly 2012 to 2015, characterized by hyperrealistic drawings in accessible linear mediums, such as colored pencil, graphite, and occasionally ballpoint pen, was a unique moment in history during which the internet housed a hyper-contemporary art movement, driven by community and accessibility. While this movement shared traits with the post-graffiti street art movement, pop art, the more general hyperrealism trend, and even the show posters of French impressionist Toulouse-Lautrec, Tumblr realism was distinct in the way it was shaped by social media platforms, the use of graphite and colored pencil, typically just drafting tools in fine art, and its use of pop culture as a tool to connect with audiences of artists and other social media users across the globe, rather than as social critique. So examples of this would be the drawings we saw when we were 13, like a graphite photorealistic image of a person dripping with honey or water. Maybe just the honey is colored in yellow and everything else is black and white. An extremely zoomed in drawing of lips. They're super, super round. It's like a Kylie lip kit, but the lips are green. And there's like an emerald balanced on the edge of the lip and it's biting its lip and the teeth are huge. That kind of thing. Like the shit that was in the early ages of Instagram art scene. So I'm going to write about that because I haven't ever seen anything written about that, but every realist artist that I know was a part of that movement. I was part of that movement. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I can give you some examples. Some artists that work in this medium or that did at the time were Paul Stowe, GJ Art on Tumblr. That's GEEJAY Art on Tumblr. It's Lanaya on Instagram. ITSSLANIA. I used to follow her. I loved her. Me. I can fucking upload some examples. I'm still trying to decide if I can reference myself in an academic paper, but we'll see. Morgan Davidson Art, who still makes art in this medium, actually. It's one of the only examples I found of an artist who's continued in that style. And Nat Morley, who I forgot about, but I was messaging my friend about this today. And he told me to follow her way back when because he thought I'd like her work. I found a bunch of articles about her. Apparently, she was a MySpace model that started doing drawings. And when she was famous, she was 17. That's when I Facebook friended her when I was like 13. And there's a bunch of articles written about her transition from MySpace modeling to this, being famous. She did a portrait of Tyler, the Creator, that he retweeted and like shouted her out, and it was insane. I was Facebook friends with her at one point. But I also found some articles accusing her of cheating and tracing, and she deleted everything. No longer exists. No record of her anywhere since past like 2015. And there's a new artist with the same name that does printmaking. That's the only thing that you see when it comes up, but it's not the same person.
That is such a funny accusation to just like end it all over. Like,
the thing is, the article was like...
You traced that picture.
It was a fucking column on DeviantArt. It was a random person, so I don't know if that's the reason. Another thing that could be possible is that Nat Morley was never her name, because she was a MySpace model. Maybe she just deleted those accounts. Her webpage is gone. Her fucking Tumblr's gone.
That's the thing with young artists is like, and if you're a young artist and nobody's investing in you or taking you seriously, this is literally the reason why.
Yeah.
It's because when you were a young artist, and when I say young, I mean anywhere from 16 to fucking 30, people aren't sure if you're just gonna quit and stop making art and delete all your social media and just be like, nah, I don't give a shit. I want to be a anthropologist now.
Yeah.
Or like, I decided to stop all that ceramic sculpture I was doing, and now I am a climate activist.
She was 17 when she was famous, and probably
Right.
13 when she was famous on MySpace.
Right, and that's the thing with like the art world. It's like a lot of young artists are like, I can't get shows, or like no one wants to buy my art, and it's just like that's why. It's because they want to make sure that you're not going to do that
That's true.
before they invest in you.
It's a shame, because another thing is I'm trying to write about this person, and in my wildest dreams, I'd love this to be an exhibition exploring this art movement, because it was an art movement, but none of these people exist anymore. I've spent like most of the afternoon today trying to find sources of the imagery I'm talking about, because the only reason I know it happened is that I lived it. I was part of this moment. I made art like this. I followed other people like this. It was a community that existed, that there are artists that are better for it. That's why I'm good at realism, is because I was competing with these people and I was in these communities, but it's very hard to find it. And the reason for that is that it was an internet-based art movement before the early internet. Like, some of these things are documented on the Wayback Machine or whatever, but if you're just thinking about the movement in general, if you're trying to find this image, there's now been 15 years of new media that comes up first in algorithmic searches. If you Google that kind of picture, you're going to find something that somebody made this week, which isn't going to be the same. They were also sourced mostly on We Heart It, which doesn't exist anymore. Tumblr.
Doesn't We Heart It's gone?
They still own the URL, but it's just a blank page that says We Heart It. It's kind of a bummer.
Really?
Tumblr also, it's really interesting because
We Hear Tit?
Shut up.
You don't remember people saying
Yeah, I do. Tumblr is
Shut up.
interesting. Tumblr is interesting because those pieces are still archived there, but if you reblog someone's post and they deactivate, it says that the source is whatever their blog name is deactivated with a number.
Right.
So you can't find the artist names. You just see their URLs, and the page doesn't exist, and there's no way to find out who made it. Because everybody's also doing scrawly signatures at the time, never putting their names in the captions, nothing. So I'm finding examples, but they're just floating images. This was also the, like, shameless art theft era, before people gave a fuck about AI and decided that they cared about, like, integrity. People were just stealing images and putting them on We Heart It and re-downloading them and shit.
From
It's so
what I
funny.
hear, that's like still a thing. So
A lot
here's
of
the
people pretend to care about art theft, side note.
this is the thing that the reason that I think, I mean, I'm sure you'll write about this in your paper and maybe have your own thoughts about it, but I have thought about this type of art and that era of art many times myself. And the biggest problem with like the hyper-realism internet art,
Right.
where it's the painting of honey lips or the fucking green lips biting a diamond or whatever the fuck it is.
Yeah.
The problem with that shit is that people who can do hyperrealism or even just regular realism are masters at copying. And a lot of them will even self-deprecatingly say like, "Oh, I can copy perfectly, but I suck at being creative."
Right.
Andy Warhol used to say that about himself, that he never had good ideas, but he could copy things perfectly.
He's in my paper, too.
He was a master draftsman. He was extremely talented at drawing and then whatever. But
Right.
the thing with that art is that if you post a really dope hyperrealism thing or a really crafty, trendy, really sick painting and it gets popular, people will 100% just clone it.
Yeah.
Like we have an artist that we know that I'm going to tell the story secondhand because he might I don't know, it might be weird, but an artist we know was making disco ball paintings where it would be a circle canvas and then a perfect realism painting of a disco ball on the canvas.
Right.
And they were like abstract and oil and looked really cool. But apparently he was telling me that these like girls that had like a big Instagram account or something where they were like modeling and painting and stuff started doing exact clones of his disco ball paintings.
Right.
Some of them were to a T. Like if you held them up next to each other, it was like they copied the real painting
Wow.
and were like selling them and like blew up like with these disco ball pieces.
That's fucked up.
And he just got fucked. He just like
Classic.
failed. No disco ball success.
Well,
And he just stopped making them. He just like
Yeah,
and
you
I
have
guess,
to.
And to conclude my point from earlier that I was trying to make is like that's the thing with these paintings is if you make one of those images, it becomes like it's like in comedy. You've heard the phrase a street joke. You know what
Yeah.
a street joke is?
Mm-hmm.
A joke, an authorless joke that anybody tells that is famous. It's like a folk story.
Yeah.
And this happens with art too, where if it's almost like if it's too generic, or if it's something that can be done by anybody, it ends up kind of doing that, and it becomes a street painting, essentially, like Mickey Mouse ears or something.
Yes and no, though, because another point that I was going to make about this is that this is different than a lot of art movements you'd usually see in art history because it's not funded by anybody. This majority of what I'm finding are by young people between the ages of 13 and 15 years old. And they're not using these mundane imagery or like pop culture references. Like you see a lot of like eye makeup, sometimes in later images, Kylie lip kits. You see Mike Wazowski is a really common image in this movement. Like dumb Pixar shit that like is just a way to practice rendering. What these people were doing, and also their portraits of people, like people with honey dripping down their faces, those photos are usually from magazines because these are young people trying to demonstrate their ability to do realism. Someone else can copy your subject matter, but you can't be that good. That they're using these relatable images to illustrate in a way that's recognizable to an everyman on Instagram how good they are at using pencil, which is interesting because pencil isn't considered a fine arts tool in the scope of normal history. It's used as a drafting tool for a painting or a drafting tool for even a charcoal drawing. But colored pencil, you don't often see that in museums. Sometimes, but I feel like it's like an even less professional version of like watercolor painting. It's rare.
It's because it's a new medium. Like, compared to art history, people still consider acrylic paints to be a new medium.
Right.
And that was invented in the fucking 1950s. So
Paperworks are also harder to display, but like
I'm sure, I guarantee there's major museums that own colored pencil pieces. Like, I'm sure of it. It would be crazy to think that there isn't any.
But can you think of a art movement that was impactful to a lot of people that lasted a couple years that was purely colored pencil besides this one?
No, but I mean, if any, maybe this could be one, but I don't think so. I mean, I'm kind of skeptical of like what fucking art movements have happened that I can even name that are like new art movements with like contemporary stuff. Like in a hyper, like last 10 to 15 years style. I don't fucking know.
Textiles, abstract weaving, and climate change art are both trends. You see those all the time.
Maybe we just call them trends now.
I think the difference between a trend and a movement is the lasting impact, and it's too soon to say with a lot of those. Like this at the time, I never would have thought would matter. This was like junk you'd see on your feed. But it did have a lasting impact. You ask anybody our age that does realism, they were there. Or they remember it.
How funny would it be if in like 200 years or something, like, you know, they look back on this period of time and they're like, we think like there's like millions of different like micro niches and trends, but they're just like, oh yeah, that's the internet era. That's when they did internet shit and internet art and art that was made when the internet existed.
But even that, like, there are so many subcategories of internet art over the
Right.
20 years we've had it.
Of course, but I'm just saying, like, I wonder when you zoom out, like, if you weren't us and you zoomed out and you're from a different era, would you just see this as just like, oh yeah, the honey lips are just like the ASCII art from 1999.
Yes and no. I guess that's kind of what I'm doing in this paper. But I think that would be like an overarching umbrella term versus a specific. Like French Impressionist painters versus like specific abstract expressionist painters versus landscape abstract painters. You know what I mean? Like there's subcategories of larger terms. Like this is definitely internet art. There's a lot of different definitions of internet art, but you wouldn't compare this kind of drawing, which is a format made specifically for Tumblr during like the filter era and square image era and like rainbows everywhere kind of thing, to the way someone would make a TikTok video now. Like abstract TikTok comedy is video art for the TikTok age. This kind of thing would never fly nowadays. It was specifically for the era of like rainbow filters, posting pictures with your rainbow Starbucks drink, all different color nails, like lip gloss. Like this is girly, hyper-realistic art for teenage girls in 2012, which is a specific moment in time that I'm making the posit was from the roots of other things that led to other stuff. You can even make a comparison between this and Warhol soup cans. There is a statement to be made that a picture of a girl made of colored pencils holding a lip gloss, like a baby lips lip gloss with her nails done that was on Instagram, is similar to the fucking, what's her name? Marilyn Monroe prints.
Yeah, I could see that.
The difference is that this is not making any kind of statement. This was just for the sake of blending in with the rest of what's on your feed. This was to get attention and to find community. versus a critique of pop culture.
Well, I look forward to when we do a real episode on it.
Yeah, I have more writing to do, but
I feel like you're just doing it now.
I guess so. I didn't fully explore it yet. I have 2 pages of notes.
Huh.
I'm working on it from like 5 to 10 p.m. Well, 5 to 9. Yeah, I have a lot more to say about that, but I guess I'll wait.
Wow. So, could this be your inaugural scripted episode? You finally did a script. I think you haven't done that until right now.
I didn't do a script, though. I just did an essay.
Dio, all of mine are essays. They're all essays. They're just essays that you read.
But when I said I was going to not read it word for word and summarize it, you didn't like that.
I don't read mine word for word either.
Yeah, but that's what I said, and you were like, no.
No, that's a different argument. I'm just saying. So why isn't this your first scripted episode?
I guess it is. It's not scripted, though. I just did it.
Oh, for God's sake.
I got my nails done today.
Congratulations. They look beautiful.
I got French tips.
Ugh, French.
It just kind of looks like my hands, but better. I told the nail lady that it was just like my hands, but clean, and she laughed at me.
Just like my hands, but clean.
It is, though. Look, it's the exact tone of my nail bed.
All right, dude. I think we got to wrap this up. I'm kind of cashed out.
Okay.
Am I killing your vibe?
No. Sorry, I didn't mean to say it like that. I just meant like, okay.
What a great way to record episodes.
Oh, I want to shout out our show, but it's too late.
Shout out our show? What show?
The one on the 9th.
Oh, that's not going to be... No, that already happened.
I know. I guess I'll post about it on the Instagram. Have we?
Posted about it on the art podcast? Probably not.
We did. We should.
Yeah, we will. It's in like 12 days.
Yeah, but anyway, the reason I was thinking about this was because I always talk about how I don't have a lot of art to post, but I've been doing a lot of fucking writing, and some of it's actually good. So
post your writing. People read writing on Instagram all the time.
Yeah.
Just put it in square slides.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you think that guy we bought these mics from and this recorder from ever interviewed anybody with these mics?
That's a good question. I kind of
think it got that far.
I mean, if he did, he deleted it because we looked at his Facebook.
Yeah, we checked him out.
I just closed a ton of tabs absentmindedly and removed a bunch of my research. Fucking idiot.
Oh, it's the worst.
Why did I do that? Okay, I found
Because
him.
you're an idiot. Just kidding. All right, I got to shut this off. I'm done.
Yeah.
All right, cool recording. Thank you. Love you. Good times.
You're welcome. Love you. Good times.
Okay, cool. All right.
Bye.
Boston App Podcast. Boston App Podcast. Show. All right,
What are
bye.
you doing?
Boston Art. Oh my God. Boston Art Podcast is an independent production by Brian Huntress and Theodora Earthworms. To learn more, follow us on Instagram at Boston Art Podcast or visit our website, bostonartpodcast.com. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not represent any organizations or affiliations they may be associated with. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.